Hi everyone and welcome to a pretty special lens review. This time I'm referring to the Maksutov, I hope I spelled that correctly, 1000mm f10 lens. This lens is actually a telescope, however in this review we are going to mount it behind the camera, so I will just refer to it as lens. And we have two different cameras we are going to mount it behind. First of all I have the Sony A7R II, which is a 42 megapixel full frame camera, and it also has a stabilized sensor. So this would be very interesting if the stabilization can do anything on such a long focal length here. And I also have the Sony A6000, which is a relatively affordable APS-C camera with 24 megapixel sensor, and this is an APS-C sensor, so this lens will be 1500mm on this sensor, so it will be very interesting how sharp this lens can actually be and how far we can look with this lens. This lens is relatively heavy and it's built all metal. In German we also refer to this lens as Russentonne. It's really big, and you have an M42 mount here at the back where you can screw an adapter. And keep in mind that this lens is of course all manual. You have a focus ring for focusing, and you don't have aperture plates because this is a mirror lens, which usually don't have this. Keep in mind that these mirror lenses also have some special characteristics like this donut bokeh, which we're going to see if we can actually see this bokeh in our test and if it's disturbing or not. And what's pretty cool is you also have a lens hood where you can just push out here, and this should keep away flaring and keep the contrast levels high, but still it's a mirror lens, so the contrast won't be that high probably. The minimum focus distance of this lens is 8 meters, and that compared with the f10 aperture means we can do any testing inside here. I mean, 8 meters is quite a lot. So we need to go out and find out what this lens can deliver. And I would say, yeah, let's go out and check out this lens. So I'm now outside with the camera, and I'm sorry for the quality, I don't have a mic jack here, and currently filming the RX100 Mark III. And here I have the A7R II mounted to the telescope lens, and over there is a village about roughly 2 to 3 kilometers away. And now we are going to look if we can see anything here with this lens and how the quality actually is. So I will begin in full frame mode, and we will shoot at ISO about 3200, which is very high, but the f10 aperture is very dark, and we need a shutter speed of roughly about 1000. Even with the tripod it's very shaky. I will also try how the steady shot will behave if we go lower with the shutter speed. But first of all, let's just start here and take a look, and let's see if we can see anything here. And it's really amazing. First of all, let me take the camera so you can see the live view. Just switch it over here, and here's the live view of the image, which is not zoomed at the moment. I can zoom in here as well, and you can see how it's shaking. It's very far away. Just let's take a look where I'm looking at. I'm now zooming to 70 millimeters. This is as far as I can go with the RX100 here, and I'm looking at somewhere down there in this village on the screen here, and this is really amazing how close you can look at. So now I will take a few shots, and we can look at the quality, and you can see on the screen how the camera is shaking, because it's a little bit windy outside here and the image is just shaking. And just if I touch the camera, you can see all this shaking here, and this is now zoomed all the way in, 12.5 magnification. This is now really close, and yeah, you can almost look inside the buildings here. So to get an idea what we are looking at, this is now filmed with the Sony 24-240 at 24mm, and I'm now going to zoom in all the way, and now we are at 240mm. And now we are going to compare it to the 1000mm. So the first thing I noticed when looking at the image was that they don't have a lot of contrast. So the first thing I did was post-processing the RAWs in Lightroom. And here's the first result of the first image with the church in the middle of the frame. So now let's take a closer look and zoom in. And you can see it's quite a little bit soft. I also applied some noise reduction because we are at ISO 1600 already. But fortunately the 1/250th of a second was pretty much enough to get a sharp detailed image here. So here's another image, and this one is particularly low contrast, and this is also pretty far away. So I did a lot of post-processing, and here's the result. I think it looks much better, but still keep in mind you can gain back detail which is not there. When we zoom in here, we can see that someone is walking with his or her dog, but it's quite soft. I'm not sure if I had maybe misfocused the lens, because it's not that easy. As you may have seen, it's always shaking when you're trying to focus, and maybe it's also the shutter speed, which was 1/400th of a second, or maybe it was because of the huge distance with the air circulation, which could also be one influence that the image is getting quite soft. But still, it's quite amazing how far you can look here. So this time I want to see how the bokeh looks, which is basically the autofocus areas. Since this is a mirror lens, we can maybe notice some donut-like shaping and a disturbing bokeh. But in this situation, I don't think the bokeh is really disturbing. It looks basically pretty normal. When we zoom in, however, we can see some donut-like shaping in the highlights. In this case, the foreground was roughly about 400 to 500 meters away, while the background was 2 to 3 kilometers away. It just looks pretty different. It looks much closer together because of this huge focal length. However, I don't think that the bokeh is much of a big deal. Maybe if you're shooting much closer subjects, however, it can be worse, of course. So now I've mounted the Sony a6000, and as mentioned earlier, since this is a crop camera, we are now at 1500mm here, and you can see when I'm just touching the camera, the frame is already shaking a lot. I hope you can see anything here. We are still looking at the village down, and now I'm zooming in here. And this is about 6 times zoomed in, and now I'm zooming again, and this is 12 times inside the frame. And I try to find anything so we can take a look here, but it's shaking quite a lot. But you may see that this is just a little bit soft. We will see this in the results later. I will now take a few shots here. Of course, I work with self-timer, because always every time I touch the camera, it's just shaking a lot, which makes focusing a little bit tricky as well. So we will see how the results look like. So here's the image from the crop sensor camera, and as in the images before, the contrast levels are really low. So I've post-processed the image here, and the same what I already mentioned when looking through the live view. The image is relatively soft. Maybe I didn't focus perfectly, or maybe it's also because the shutter speed was still too slow, but we are already at ISO 3200, and for a crop sensor camera this is really high, so you can already see that the noise is really visible in the image, and I have to do a lot of noise reduction here. But still amazing how close we can get here. And this image shows the top of a mountain, which is probably about 10 kilometers away, and this image is the sharpest one I got from the APS-C camera, and it actually shows quite a lot of detail. The contrast levels are low again, but I'm also shooting against the sky here, so this is to be expected. And here's the last example from the crop sensor camera, which is an object nearby. It's also a little bit soft, but not that bad. I also had here ISO 6400, and this means the noise is quite visible, and the noise reduction makes the image probably more soft than the lens itself. So here are my conclusions about this lens. I mean, first of all, it's obviously not a run and gun lens. You need a lot of time, and when you want to shoot something which is moving fast, like birds or other animals, you could probably forget about it. I would rather recommend to get like 600mm zoom lens. I mean, they are quite expensive, but they are well worth the money for such cases. However, if you have some time and you take your tripod somewhere and you want to maybe look from the top of a mountain somewhere inside the villages, or maybe have some slow moving animals, it can be quite a lot of fun. You also need a lot of light. Today when we were out, the light wasn't that perfect, and I had ISO 3200, and this was at daytime. I mean, this is quite huge. Normally I use such ISOs not even in low light situations. I try to avoid this. However, we need short shutter speeds in order to keep the image sharp here. I also tried the steady shot from the Sony A7. And actually the steady shot, the highest value I could choose was actually 1000mm. However, I didn't found that it makes much of a difference. I mean, every slide touching the camera and it was shaking again, so didn't made a lot of sense. So I mean, it's nice to have, and for shorter focal length it's probably well worth to use it. But at this long focal length you don't have to expect anything from it here. But still, it was a lot of fun, and I hope you had also fun watching this as well. And if you want to see more reviews about this lens, like maybe shooting the moon, let down a comment below and I will see if I can do something like that. And if you want to see more reviews in the future, make sure to subscribe to that channel. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and see you in the next video. Bye.